There are three types of left-hand voicings that are standard jazz left-hand voicings, and I'd like to show them to you today. These are kind of the voicings that are used even when you transcribe some of the most complicated transcriptions. You'll find that the jazz artists were using these voicings. So namely, these are Bud Powell voicings or shell voicings, rootless left-hand voicings. The third kind of voicing is with an altered 5 to a minor 6, which will happen over minor 2-5-1s. These are the voicings that you want to have. These are kind of like the fundamental shapes that you would need to know. The first kind of voicing, as I had said, was a shell voicing, and this is based upon the fact that your left hand is going to be playing a type of a shell. They're really simple. I'm going to be explaining these voicings over 2-5-1s, and later on in the video I'm going to show you how you can use it over a song. Here we have major 2-5-1 voicings, and I'm going to explain these now. In the key of C, chord 2 would obviously be D minor 7. And how we voice these shell voicings in your left hand is you do root and 7. The way these voicings work is that you have the option of doing root and 7th or doing root and 3rd only. So I'm going to start with root and 7th, and then for chord 5, which is G7, I'm going to do root and 3rd. And then for chord 1, root and 7th. So they always kind of alternate. If you start off with root and 7th, the next chord will be root and 3rd, and then the next chord will be root and 7th. Alternatively, you can start off with root and 3rd, right? That would be D and flat 3, which is F, and then you would go to root and 7th for G7, and then you do root and 3rd. Both can be useful. Now for chord 5, what's also really typical and standard is to actually add the flat 7 in that shell. So what you want to do is actually just practice it like over a cycle of whole tones, or cycle of fourths or minor thirds, major thirds, all these things, semitones. Just with the metronome. And you'll see that it'll start to get high, and maybe now you want to start with root and 3rd. And then you're back where you started. The second type of voicing for left hand would be rootless left hand voicings. The rule for these voicings is that they have to start on chord tones. So you build them either on the 3rd or on the 7th of the chord. If I have D minor 7, I want to build the chord starting from the flat 3. Or I want to build a chord starting from flat 7. Alright, and these chords make use of extensions. So you'll find that they'll have the 9th or the 13th in there, and the 13th. They generally have both. The first one is kind of a root position style, but starting on the 3rd. So this would be root position D minor, right, with the 7th, and then we add the 9th. But because it's rootless, we just start on the F, which is the 3rd. And when we move to chord 5, G7, the only thing that moves is the flat 7 down to what would be the 3rd for chord 5. Right, and it gives you a G13. For C major 7, chord 1, it's kind of like the same as D minor. It's a root position with the 9th on top. So we have and again, the only thing that changes from D minor to G7 is this C. It comes down a half step to become the 3rd of chord 5. Then we have a C major 9. Now it's also useful to know this kind of voicing on the 7th because when you're playing in different keys, sometimes this shape might look a little high. For instance, if we are in G minor or if we are in A flat, you know, you don't want to use it because when you're starting on the third, the chords get too high. So when you know them at different inversions, it helps. And the other inversion would be when you are starting on the flat 7. So it's useful to know. Starting on flat 7, the same kind of voicing. It actually has all the notes that we had here, but it kind of creates a cluster when you start it on flat 7. The 9th would be here, the 3rd would be here, and the 5 will be over there. Now this voicing is quite high. I wouldn't really voice D minor 7 up here as a left hand voicing anyway, but again, in other keys it'll be useful. Like if I have B flat minor, I'm definitely using it there. If I have G minor, I'm definitely using that flat 7 inversion. But here we are, and again the same thing is going to apply. The only thing that moves or changes when you're moving to chord 5 is the flat 7, which goes down to what would be the 3rd of chord 5, and you end up with another chord that starts on the major 7 here for a major 7 chord. So we have as it comes to minor 2-5-1s, let's stick with C. So we'll have D half diminished and G7 to C minor 6. Right? I mean, in jazz, typically the chord 1 in a minor is always 6, but it doesn't have to be a minor 6, but I just like to make it a minor 6. And I think if you haven't been doing that, you should try it out. It really does give a nice sound. So D half diminished. Here you actually have options. You can start it on the root. You can start the left hand voicing on the root, or you can start it on the 3rd. But in the case of half diminished, you can also start it on the flat 5. In jazz, you know, they always say the 5, you can omit the 5 because it's a neutral chord tone. It's really a tension. It doesn't take away the fact that a chord is major or minor, and so we often omit the 5. But in the case of a half diminished, 5 is flattened and it is part of the chord. It really is what gives the chord its sound. So the flat 5 really has a strong half diminished sound that you're looking for. So it's okay in this case to start on the 5. You'll notice for the other ones, I didn't voice anything starting from the 5. The way that I was taught that chords that start on the 5 tend to be ambiguous. In my own experience, I don't really voice left-hand voicing starting on the 5 because they really do sound a bit muddy and ambiguous. But I know that there are ways to get around that. But I think fundamentally the 3 and the 7 are what you want to build your chords on. But again, going back to half diminished, flat 5 would kind of be the exception where you can. But my only concern with starting on flat 5 is where would you go when you go into chord 5? You know, if you're doing, this sounds perfectly fine to me. But if you're going to, are you going to do that? Because the whole idea of these 2-5 voicings is that they have to have really good voice leading. You want to do as minimal movement as possible. And I don't know if I would want a chord to start on flat 9. Doesn't sound bad, but you know, I'm just concerned with voice leading. That's not bad at all. But what I want to show you is how I would voice it. And I think these are also kind of standard voicings. I would voice it root position for half diminished. Chord 5, I would do an altered G7, which starts on the flat 7. So we have flat 7, 3 and flat 13. And then for chord 1, we have a minor 6, 9 chord, which is root 6 and 9. Can add the 5 in there as well. So we have so now what we want to do is we want to take a song and we want to see how we can use these within a song. And I'm going to use the song Beautiful Love just because I think it has a nice balance between going from minor to the relative major, so we can kind of practice both. That's the A7 alt. Right, that's the D minor 6 that we had used. That's the G minor starting on flat 7. Again, the only thing we move flat 7 to E. For C7, there's F major. And you may be wondering why I'm doing a natural 13, just because the melody now, you know, doesn't imply a half diminish anymore. It implies a major 2/5. And I wouldn't really want to put a flat 13 with a natural 9. I don't know. If you like that sound, go for it, but I don't know if it works in this instance. So I do a natural 13, and you can always change it, you know, while you are playing this section. You could do, is it minor 6 left hand voicing? And I'll probably voice this like this. So here's the thing, is that the left hand voicings are not always going to work perfectly, where you're always going to have, you know, your chord starting on the 3rd there, or the other chord starting on the flat 7, you know, like, and you're not always gonna have, or sometimes you have to use just plain root 3rd and 7th, you know, because the melody can sometimes get in the way of you wanting to do what you're wanting to do. And it's not always things will fall as perfectly as you would want them to fall. So this is why it's good to have a broad knowledge base, so that when you are playing songs, you're able to pull what's needed. So in this instance, I'm having an E, you know, with just root flat 7 3, which gives me a nice sharp 11 voicing, but that I wouldn't really call that a left hand voicing, but it works in this instance. Here as well, I'm just doing a diminished kind of a situation. Here it can work. Here not so much. I'm just doing root 7 3 sharp 11. Here left hand voicing, sure. Right, so we'd have now let's also try to use those shell voicings where we can. Remember, we only have root 3rd or root 7th. I know it kind of sounds really dry, but when you're playing with the band, that's all you really need. You know, you don't need to always be adding lots and lots of tensions. The most important thing is that as a pianist, you're outlining the harmony. And if you're outlining the harmony, your job is done, really. And I find that shell voicings actually work best, especially when you've got a more of an up-tempo song. They kind of really help you get by through the song, and really effectively as well. And shell voicings are also good when you're improvising in the mid-range. Then once you move, you know, upwards and your solo is building and whatever, then you want to kind of use these upper structure voicings. So you just want to play. And if I'm playing a solo, you know, I'll maybe start with shell voicings at the beginning, more or less. And now I'm getting higher. Maybe I'll use this voicing. And so forth. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave a super thanks. You can like the video and subscribe as well. And I'll see you again in the next one. Bye.